All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. There's nothing flashy about the 2023 version of the Alabama Crimson Tide, but plain and simple, they just keep on winning. You look at this team that has continuously improved since the Texas loss. The Tide, they're now 9-1. They're sitting in the catbird seat in the SEC West. And with their dominating win this past Saturday over Kentucky, the Tide have now punched a ticket to the SEC championship game next month. Now, Alabama's offense has been a work in progress throughout the year, while they've been leaning on a solid defense. But now the Crimson Tide are putting up points. As you look at their last three games, they got Tennessee for 34, 42 against LSU, and then this past Saturday against the Kentucky Wildcats, Alabama was able to put up 49 in that contest. It was a dominating performance by the Crimson Tide. Most notably, you look at quarterback Jalen Milroe, six touchdowns that he accounted for, three through the air, and then three more on the ground. And then you look at this offense around him, things are just coming together. I know that Jermaine Burton was out with an illness this past Saturday, but it didn't make any difference for what Alabama was able to do. Nonetheless, Isaiah Bonded, wide receiver Jace McClellan, and this solid offensive line. And then you look at this defense, and it's a typical Nick Saban defense with so many versatile, interchangeable parts. You got Dallas Turner and Caleb Downs, Deontay Lawson, Tresman Marshall, and I could go on and on and on about the stout defenders on that side of the ball. And at the end of the day, Nick Saban is still Nick Saban. You know, this guy has not forgotten how to coach. And it's very interesting when somebody has been as dominant as Nick Saban has been. And of course, he's a little older now. So people always want to take an opportunity, if you will, to say, you know what? Nick Saban's time is winding down. Nick Saban doesn't have it anymore. This, that, and the third. The man lost two games last year. Okay. And let's look back at it. He lost on a walk-off field goal against Tennessee at Knoxville. And then he lost on a walk-off touchdown to LSU in Baton Rouge on a Saturday night. That was it. Alabama went and they beat everybody else on their schedule. And it's one of those where most coaches, most programs around the country, they'd be more than happy to have a two-loss season. But it's just to show you where the standards are when it comes to Alabama, as far as the wins and losses, as far as contending for national championships, that a coach of the caliber of Nick Saban, who's arguably the greatest college head coach to have ever done it, can lose two games and people are saying, you know what, this man is losing it. But nonetheless, to me, we've seen this before from Alabama. They start off slow, they have a loss early on in the season. People are questioning them, and then you know what? They put it together. And you look at this team, it wasn't pretty at first. I mean, after the Texas loss, Saban benched Jalen Milroe for Tyler Buchner. That didn't work out in the South Florida game. However, Alabama was still able to win 17-3, even though that game was a lot closer than that. But then I think that Alabama really began to get their footing against Mississippi the following week. And then from there, getting and going against Mississippi State, uh, surviving Texas A&M on the road. And honestly, that final score wasn't indicative of how much that Alabama dominated that game for the most part. A tough one with Arkansas at home, down 20-7 to Tennessee before they rattled off 27 straight. Going back and forth with LSU, but then defensively turning it up in the second half, and then basically clicking on all cylinders this past Saturday in Lexington against the Wildcats. Now they're going to get Chattanooga at home this coming Saturday, and that's their final tune-up before the Iron Bowl against Auburn. And I hope, and I know Nick Saban's not going to do it, but you never want to overlook that game. First and foremost, the Iron Bowl, as far as the legacy and the rivalry, if you will, you can make the argument that that's second to none in the college football landscape as far as top rivalries go. Then on top of that, the Iron Bowl is one of those situations. One team could be 0-11, the other team could be 11-0, but that 0-11 team is going to play their heart out just to simply say they beat the undefeated rival. And excuse me, of course, in this scenario right here, this is the first year for Hugh Freeze as the head coach of Auburn. And if you go back, Hugh Freeze, this isn't his first rodeo in the SEC. More importantly, it's not his first rodeo in the SEC West. And he gave Nick Saban fits when he was at Ole Miss, and I guarantee you, Nick Saban and company have not forgotten that. So that is not going to be a cakewalk per se for the Crimson Tide, especially since they have to travel to Jordan Hare for that one. And then on top of that, you've got the matchup with Georgia. And I think that's the one that a lot of people obviously have circled because I think in this last year of the divisional format in the SEC, I think it's only fitting that Alabama is going to Atlanta because you think about, especially in the last 15 years, nobody's dominated this conference like Alabama has. It's basically sacrilege for them and the folks in Tuscaloosa to make the trek east to Atlanta for the SEC championship game, and obviously they're going to do it once again. For my money, I feel like because right now we all know that Georgia's a two-time defending champions, and the Bulldogs have a legitimate chance to go and make it three times. But people are saying, well, this team could beat Georgia, that team could beat Georgia. I think at the end of the day, this is probably the best team that can beat Georgia, if that's going to be the case, and that's Alabama because of the way that they match up with them. And I mean, Kirby Smart, he learned so much from Nick Saban as far as what it takes to go out there and prepare your team, recruiting, scouting, developing players, motivating, all of that stuff. Okay. And he's basically Nick Saban East, if you will, at this point, as far as what Kirby Smart has been able to do in the SEC. But I'll tell you like this. You go back to last year's national championship game out at SoFi in the pregame, or I can't remember if it was pregame or postgame. Please don't hold me to it. But nonetheless, when David Pollock was still working for ESPN, and of course David Pollock, proud graduate, Georgia grad, All American, one of the best pass rushers in SEC history, and of course, unfortunately, his NFL career was cut short due to a neck injury. I really think that he was going to be one of the better pass rushers in the NFL. But David Pollock, made a comment about Georgia basically taking over for Alabama. And the look on Nick Saban's face as he was a guest analyst that evening on the program, Nick Saban had a look like, okay, you know what? I'll show you. And I guarantee you, Nick Saban is a guy, you can't be that great and be that good for so long and not have way different ways and find different things to use as motivation. I guarantee you, Nick Saban used that for motivation. And I think this Alabama team is going to get better. And let me rephrase that: not get better because they have gotten better, but be ready for that matchup against Georgia because it's bragging rights, it's the SEC championship, and also it's a berth in the college football playoff. What more can you ask for? But nonetheless, this Alabama team, they're clicking at the right time, especially on offense, and that's going to be important going forward against some of the elite teams in college football because for the sake of argument, let's say Alabama gets past Georgia and they get to the playoff. You're still going to have to go out there and deal with some of the top teams in the nation. But just scaling it back real quick and talking about Georgia, now that Jalen Milroe has shown that he can throw the football consistently down the field, now that he can show that he is that legit dual threat that can do, excuse me, a little bit of everything. That is something else for this Georgia defense to think about because you just can't pin your ears back and go after this young man. Very versatile. Alabama has a lot of confidence on offense. I think things are coming together now with Tommy Reese as their offensive coordinator. And this is a time of the year when you want to be playing your best. We're in the stretch run of the regular season. And of course, the postseason is right around the corner. And this is why you go to Alabama. This is why, Nick Saban recruited you for these moments. And nonetheless, this Alabama team, we've seen them do it before as far as starting off slow, picking it up, and then come December, they're so battle tested and so ready after surviving the tough SEC West that they were able to do bigger and better things come January. And I think this current Alabama team has that same opportunity. So they've put it together at the right time. Another trip to Atlanta for the SEC championship game. And let's see if Alabama's going to be able to do what so many teams have not been able to do over the last couple of years, which is slow down Georgia. And honestly, for what it's worth, who was the last team to beat Georgia 2 years ago in the SEC championship game? It was the Alabama Crimson Tide. So let's see if they can do it again. So, folks, that is going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank you for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. I want to take this time out to thank all of you fine folks out there for tuning in. And if you have not already, please feel free to subscribe to this channel. Now, if you're on the X, excuse me, formerly known as Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it'll be my pleasure to follow you right back. There's also the sports discussion group on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365 that you can check it out. Drop a line and be a part of one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. So, once again, fine folks, my name is William Martin. I'm signing off. Thanks for your patience as I'm ailing through this bad throat right now, but nonetheless, I am on the mend. And with that said, I'm signing off and saying take care. And thanks once again for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. Be well, everybody.